I was too tired to keep driving. The road stretched endlessly before me, a black ribbon winding through empty countryside, flanked by miles of trees and nothingness. My GPS had stopped working hours ago. My phone's signal was dead, and just as I was starting to wonder if I'd have to sleep in my car, I saw the hotel. It wasn't there before. I was sure of it. One moment, just trees and the dark highway. The next, a towering stone building looming against the night sky, its warm golden lights flickering behind velvet curtains. The Van Wyck Grand Hotel. I never heard of it before. But at that moment, I didn't care. I just needed a place to rest. I pulled into the gravel driveway, the sound of tires crunching the only noise in the still air. There were no other cars. No signs of movement outside, but the front doors were open, spilling golden light onto the empty steps, like it was waiting for me. A strange feeling settled in my chest, like something inside me was whispering, "Turn around. Leave." But I was too exhausted, too drained to listen to my own instincts. So I grabbed my bag, stepped out of the car, and walked inside. The lobby was grand, almost absurdly so. A high domed ceiling, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in some 1920s mansion. Dark wood paneling, heavy red carpets, and the faint scent of old books and candle wax. It felt untouched by time, like I had just stepped into a different decade. A man stood at the front desk, dressed in a neatly pressed suit, his hands folded too perfectly in front of him. His name tag read, Mr. Langley. His smile never faltered as he spoke. "Welcome, sir. We've been expecting you." A chill ran down my spine. "Expecting me?" I asked. He nodded, sliding a guest book across the counter. "We always have room for travelers like you." His voice was too smooth, practiced, like he had said that exact phrase 1,000 times before. I glanced around. Still no other guests. No sounds of people upstairs. No murmurs from the lounge or dining area. Just silence. Too much silence. "Do you have Wi-Fi?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Afraid not, sir." His smile didn't fade. "No service out here, but you won't need it. The Grand offers all the comfort you could ever want." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten, like he was implying something deeper, something I wouldn't understand until it was too late. But again, I ignored it. I just needed sleep. I scribbled my name in the guest book, and the moment the pen left the page, I felt it. A shudder in the air, like the walls had just shifted around me, like something had just sealed itself in place. Mr. Langley took the book, running his fingers over my name like he was memorizing it. "Room 305, he said, handing me a key. Not a key card. An old-fashioned brass key, heavy in my palm. "Enjoy your stay." I nodded stiffly, grabbed my bag, and headed for the grand staircase. Every step felt strange, like the air was thicker up here, like the weight of the hotel was settling onto my shoulders. By the time I reached the 3rd floor, my head was pounding, like something was pressing against my skull, like something didn't want me here. Room 305 was at the end of the hall. The carpet muffled my footsteps as I made my way to the door. My fingers curled around the key, and for just a second, I hesitated. That same whisper in the back of my mind. "Leave. Go back to your car. This place isn't real." I ignored it. I turned the key. The lock clicked open, and as I stepped inside, I felt the air change, like the room had been waiting for me, like I had just become part of something I couldn't escape. The moment I stepped inside room 305, I felt it. A shift, like the air was thicker in here, like the walls had been waiting for me. The room was strangely perfect. The furniture looked antique but untouched. A large bed, neatly made with crisp white sheets. A heavy wooden dresser. A writing desk with an old-fashioned lamp that flickered softly. And on the nightstand, guest book. I set down my bag, suddenly aware of how quiet it was. The silence felt heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. No traffic outside. No wind. No hum of a heater or air conditioner. Just emptiness. I reached for the guest book on the nightstand. The cover was worn leather, the pages yellowed with age. I flipped through it, expecting to see a list of past guests. But there were no names, no dates, no messages. Just one phrase written over and over in different handwriting. The guests never leave. A chill crawled up my spine. I slammed the book shut. Enough. I was overthinking this. I was just exhausted. I needed sleep. I reached for my bag, pulling out my phone. Still no service. Just a black screen with the words, "No signal." A knock at the door. Jumped. My heart pounded as I turned. The knock came again, slow, deliberate. I took a breath, stepping toward the door. When I opened it, there was a woman standing there. She was dressed in a long silk gown, the kind you'd see in old movies. Her blonde hair was styled in loose curls, and her lipstick was a deep shade of red. She smiled, but her eyes didn't match it. They were too wide, too still, like she was trying to mimic human expression. Like she wasn't used to smiling at all. "You must be new," she said softly. Her voice was too smooth, like a recording being played at the wrong speed. "I just wanted to welcome you." I nodded slowly. Thanks." Something about her fell off. Her skin looked too flawless, like polished porcelain. She didn't blink. Not once. And then I noticed. Her feet weren't touching the ground. I blinked. For just a split second, I swore I saw it. The hem of her gown floating just above the carpet. Like she wasn't standing. Like she was hovering. I took a step back. She tilted her head, still smiling. "I'll see you at dinner." She turned and glided down the hallway, moving too smoothly, her gown barely shifting. When she reached the end of the corridor, she vanished. I slammed the door shut, my breath shaky. What the hell was that? My hands felt ice cold. I locked the door, stepping away from it like something was about to break through. But the room was silent again, as if nothing had happened. I needed to calm down. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the exhaustion was getting to me. I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my temples, and that's when I saw it. Something that hadn't been there before. A photograph on the desk. I hadn't noticed it when I walked in, but now it was sitting in plain sight. A black and white photo, the edges curling with age. I picked it up, and the second I saw the image, my blood ran cold. It was a picture of the hotel lobby. From decades ago, judging by the clothing of the people inside. Men in old suits, women in vintage dresses, guests standing by the front desk, smiling politely. And there, among them, in the center of the crowd, was Mr. Langley, looking exactly the same as he did tonight. I dropped the photo. My hands shook. No, that wasn't possible. That picture had to be from at least the 1920s. Mr. Langley hadn't aged a day. A deep unease settled in my stomach. This place wasn't just old. It was wrong. I needed to leave. I needed to get out. I rushed to the door, fumbling with the lock. The hallway outside was empty, dimly lit. But as I stepped out, I realized something wasn't right. The hallway looked longer, like it had stretched. And at the far end, the blonde woman stood there, smiling, waiting, like she knew I'd come out, like she had been expecting it. My breath hitched. The walls seemed to pulse. The lights flickered. And in that brief second of darkness, the hall was full of people. Shadowed figures in old-fashioned clothes, standing motionless, their faces blurred, watching me, waiting. The lights came back. The hallway was empty again, except for the woman. Still smiling, still watching, and in a voice that wasn't quite human, she whispered, "You should go back to your room." I didn't move. I couldn't. The woman stood at the end of the hallway, her smile frozen, her eyes locked onto me like she was waiting for something. Like she knew I was about to make the wrong choice. The walls felt closer now, the carpet stretching too far, the hallway too long to be real. I took a slow step back. Her expression didn't change. Her head tilted slightly, almost curious. And then, in a voice that sent ice through my veins, she whispered, "You should go back to your room." I turned. I walked back inside. I locked the door. I stood there for a long moment, my breath shaky, my heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't know what was happening in this hotel, but something was wrong. I sat at the desk, staring at the photo I had found earlier. Mr. Langley, unchanged for decades. A hotel full of guests that never left. A woman who didn't seem to walk on the floor. What the hell was this place? And why had it let me in? I looked at the clock on the wall. The hands hadn't moved. I checked my phone. Still no signal. Had it been minutes since I arrived? Hours? There was no way to tell. A low creaking sound echoed from the walls. I froze. Not from the hallway. Not from the ceiling. From inside the room. I turned my head slowly, and that's when I saw it. A door. A second door. Right beside the closet. One that hadn't been there before. One that should not exist. My throat tightened. I knew every detail of this room when I walked in. This door was not here when I arrived. And yet, here it was, waiting. The air felt thick now, pressing against my skin. I took a slow step forward. My breath felt too loud, too sharp in the silence. I reached for the brass handle. It was cold. Colder than it should be. Like metal left out in the winter air. Like something on the other side wasn't meant to be touched. I turned the handle. The lock clicked, too easily. The door swung open. And behind it was a room. It was small, dimly lit, lined with wooden shelves. Shelves filled with luggage. Suitcases, backpacks, purses, hundreds of them. All covered in dust. All belonging to people who weren't here anymore. I stepped inside. The air smelled stale. Like old paper and forgotten things. I reached for the nearest suitcase, brushing off the dust. The tag was still attached. A name, handwritten in fading ink. Margaret Lively, room 212. I grabbed another. Henry Devons, room 108. Another. Elliot Carr, room 407. Different names. Different rooms. But all these people had left their belongings behind. Or maybe they had never left at all. I opened a bag. Inside was a wristwatch frozen at exactly midnight. A wallet with an ID from 1956. A photo of a family. Their faces scratched out. I stepped back, my heart hammering. This wasn't a storage room. This was evidence. A place full of what the hotel didn't want found. A place full of things that belonged to people who never checked out. And then I saw something worse. At the very back of the room, one suitcase stood out. It wasn't covered in dust. It wasn't old. It was new. Like it had just been placed here. Like it was waiting for me. I stepped closer, dread crawling up my spine. The tag read, room 305. My blood ran cold. I dropped the bag, stumbling backward. No, this wasn't possible. This was my room. This was my bag. I spun toward the exit, my breathing ragged. I had to get out. I had to leave this place. But as I reached the doorway, the light flickered. The air shifted. And I felt it before I saw it. Something was standing behind me, watching, waiting. A whisper crawled through the air, brushing against my ear. You're already checked in. The light snapped off. The room plunged into darkness. And the door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed the room. The door slammed shut, sealing me inside. The whisper still lingered in the air, soft, amused. You're already checked in. My hands fumbled for my phone. I turned on a flashlight, the beam cutting through the thick shadows. The suitcases were gone. The shelves were empty. Like the room had never existed. Like the hotel was messing with me. I turned back to the door. Tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. I shoved my shoulder against it, panic creeping in. Nothing. I was trapped. I pounded against the door. Hey, let me out. The walls swallowed the sound. No echoes. No response. Just that terrible, pressing silence. I checked my phone. No signal. The screen flickered, static crawling over the display. Then, for just a second, the time appeared. 12 a.m. A chill ran down my spine. No, that wasn't possible. I had arrived before midnight. I had checked in hours ago. I had seen the clock in my room. And yet, it was still midnight. I lowered the phone, my breath unsteady. Then I noticed something else. The light under the door. It was shifting, moving, like shadows were passing outside. I pressed my ear to the wood. A soft murmuring sound drifted from a hallway. Voices, distant, whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear them getting closer. I didn't want to know who they belonged to. I just needed to get out. I slammed my palm against the door again. Please, someone. The lock clicked. I froze. The door swung open on its own, and the hallway beyond was different. The walls looked older now, the wallpaper peeling like it had been abandoned for years. The lights flickered weakly, barely illuminating the long corridor. The carpet beneath my feet was soaked, like someone had spilled water down the length of the hall. And at the far end, I saw the clock. An old grandfather clock stood against the wall. Its hands were moving backward, ticking in reverse. And as I stared at it, I felt it. The world around me shifting. Like time inside this hotel didn't move forward. It looped. It twisted. It kept its guests trapped in endless night. A voice whispered from behind me, "You're late for dinner." I spun around and came face to face with Mr. Langley. His expression unchanged, his hands neatly folded, like he hadn't moved from the lobby at all, like he had been waiting for me. "Dinner?" I croaked. He nodded. "All guests attend dinner." His tone was so calm, so final, like I had no choice, like this was part of the rules. I glanced at the grandfather clock again. The hands were spinning faster now, twisting back through time, back to an era before I even existed, back to a night that had happened before. And I finally understood. This hotel didn't just trap people. It trapped time. It kept reliving the past, a past where the guests never left, a past where I didn't belong. Mr. Langley tilted his head, his pale blue eyes studying me. "Come now. It's impolite to be late." Behind him, the hallway had changed again. A set of double doors had appeared where there had been only a blank wall before. The dining hall, the place where the guests gathered, the place where I wasn't supposed to be. I had two choices: go to dinner or run. But before I could decide, the doors at the end of the hall swung open, and I saw them. The other guests, waiting, smiling, and none of them were alive. The dining hall doors stood open, revealing the waiting guests. They weren't human anymore. Not entirely. Their faces were too smooth, their smiles too perfect, their eyes too hollow, like they had forgotten how to be people, like they were trying to mimic something they no longer understood. And all of them were looking directly at me. Mr. Langley stepped aside. "Please take your seat." His voice was calm, too composed, like he already knew what I would do, like he knew I had no choice. I took a step back. I couldn't go in there. I wouldn't. I turned, ready to run. But then, I saw something that stopped me cold. The hallway had changed again. The grandfather clock was gone. The walls were warped, stretching endlessly into the dark. And at the very end, I saw a window. A single, tall window overlooking the outside world. I didn't hesitate. I ran toward it. The closer I got, the worse the air felt. Like I was moving through something thick, heavy, wrong. Like the hotel was trying to stop me. But I forced myself forward, reaching the glass. And then, my stomach dropped. I wasn't outside anymore. The view had changed. The parking lot, the road, the trees, all of it was gone. Instead, through the glass, I saw something impossible. I saw the hotel, not from the outside, not from above, from inside itself. The window wasn't showing the world beyond the building. It was showing a different hallway, a different version of the hotel, like I was looking into a mirror of a place that shouldn't exist. And worse, I saw myself standing in that other hallway, looking back at me. My reflection didn't move when I did. It just stood there, waiting, watching, and then, slowly, it raised a hand and knocked on the glass. A sound like splintering ice cracked through the air. I stumbled back, my breath ragged. The glass shuddered, pulsing outward, like it was about to break, like something on the other side was trying to come through. I turned, my heart pounding. I had to get out of here. I had to. But Mr. Langley was still standing behind me, patient, smiling, like he hadn't moved at all. "You're not looking in the right direction." His voice was too smooth. His expression was unchanged. "Try another window." I felt it before I saw it. Something shifting, something moving around me. I turned, and now the hallway was full of windows, stretching endlessly, each one showing something different, each one wrong. In one window, I saw the lobby, but it was empty. No furniture, no lights, no people. Just a hollow, abandoned shell, like the hotel had been left to rot for decades. Like I was seeing a version of this place that had already been consumed. In another window, I saw the dining hall. The long table was set for a feast, but the chairs were all empty, and the plates were filled with dust and bones. I turned to the next window and saw my own room, room 305. The door was open. The bed was unmade, and sitting at the desk was me. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. No. That wasn't possible. But the other version of me just sat there, staring at the guest book, like it was waiting for me to return, like I was already part of this place. I spun around, but the hallway had changed again. The dining hall doors were closer now. The guests were still watching me, smiling, waiting, and then a voice, soft, whispering, right against my ear. "Pick one." I froze. The words didn't come from Langley. They didn't come from the guests. They came from everywhere at once. A voice that belonged to the hotel itself. The windows were still waiting. The guests were still watching. And deep in my gut, I knew I had to make a choice. One of these windows would let me leave. One of them would trap me forever. And one of them would lead to something worse. I stood frozen in the middle of the hallway. The windows stretched out before me, each one showing a different version of the hotel. Some were empty, some were wrong, and in one of them I saw myself, sitting in room 305, waiting, like I was already part of this place. Mr. Langley was still there, standing too still, watching me with that calm, knowing smile. "Pick one," he said again, though I was sure his lips hadn't moved. The words came from everywhere at once, like the hotel itself was speaking through him. I took a step back. I wasn't playing this game. I needed to find someone real, someone who could tell me what was happening. I turned, scanning the hallway, looking for an escape. Then I saw it, a narrow passageway to my left, one I hadn't noticed before. A sign above the door read, "Staff only." I didn't think. I just ran. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed. The whispers from the windows faded. The hallway behind me disappeared. And in front of me, dimly lit corridor, lined with portraits of the hotel staff. Each one was framed in gold. Faded black and white photos. Men and women in old-fashioned uniforms, standing stiffly, their expressions blank. I moved quickly, my footsteps barely making a sound on the dusty floor. And then I saw it. A door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. Inside, a soft lamp glow, and the sound of someone breathing. I pushed it open. Inside was a small office, crowded with bookshelves, an old desk, and a filing cabinet coated in dust. Sitting at the desk was an elderly woman. Her uniform was the same as the staff in the portraits. Her hands rested on the desk, folded neatly. She didn't look up when I entered. She just kept writing. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured. Her voice was tired, as if she had been speaking those same words for a very, very long time. "Please," I whispered. "Tell me what's going on." Her pen stopped moving. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, without looking up, she asked, "What time is it?" I glanced at my phone. My stomach dropped. The screen was frozen. Still 12 a.m. It had never changed. I slowly turned toward the wall clock. The hands were moving backward, ticking in reverse. I swallowed hard. I don't know. Finally, she looked at me. Her eyes were clouded, distant, like she had seen too much. "That's because time doesn't move here. Not the way it should. This place, it replays itself, over and over. and no one ever really leaves. My skin prickled. Then how do I get out? She hesitated. Then, softly, you don't. I felt sick. That's not true, I said. There has to be a way. Her gaze darkened. Did you write your name in the guest book? My stomach twisted. I had. The moment I checked in, I saw it written in ink, like it had always been there. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Then the hotel knows you now. You're part of it, and it doesn't like to let go. The walls creaked. A soft whispering filled the air. The hotel was listening. I don't belong here, I said, my voice shaking. She let out a tired laugh. None of us do. She motioned toward a large, leather-bound ledger on the desk. I stepped closer. The pages were full of names, thousands of them, written in neat cursive. I flipped through the pages. They went back decades, hundreds of years, and then I saw it. My name, already written, not at the bottom, not on the newest page, but somewhere in the middle, like I had been here before, like I had checked in long ago, but had somehow forgotten. I staggered back. This is impossible. Her voice was gentle now. It wants you to stay. That's how the hotel survives. It collects its guests. It keeps us inside. The air grew heavy. The walls seemed to press inward. The whispering grew louder. You need to go, she said, glancing at the door. Before it stops you. I turned to leave, but before I did, I asked, what happens to the ones who stay? She didn't answer at first. Then, softly, they become the hotel. They become like them. A sharp knock at the door. The woman froze. A shadow passed behind the frosted glass. A tall figure. Waiting. Watching. And then, Mr. Langley's voice. Sir, it's time to return to your room. The woman's face paled. Go. No. The knock on the door came again. Louder this time. Impatient. Mr. Langley's voice drifted through the wood, calm as ever. Sir, it's time to return to your room. I backed away from the door, my pulse hammering. The elderly woman stayed still, her expression tight with fear. Don't open it, she whispered. If you go back, you won't leave. I turned to her, desperate. Then how do I get out? She hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the staff ledger on the desk. The massive, leather-bound book filled with names of people who had never left. Then, her voice barely above a breath, she said, You have to erase yourself. My stomach twisted. What do you mean? Her hands shook as she opened the ledger, flipping through decades of names. Names that should have belonged to dead people. People from generations ago. And then, finally, she found mine. I stared at it. My name wasn't at the bottom. Not recent. Not new. It was buried somewhere in the middle, like it had been written long ago. Like I had always been here. Like I had forgotten. This isn't possible, I whispered. She didn't look at me. She just grabbed a pen. If you're not written in the hotel, you don't exist here, she murmured. If you're erased, maybe you can leave. Her voice dropped even lower. But it won't like it, and it will try to stop you. A third knock. The door handle rattled. Mr. Langley's voice was closer now. Sir, your room is waiting. The woman pressed the pen into my palm. Do it, before it realizes what you're trying to do. My hands were shaking. I stared at the inked letters. And my name, written so long ago. I pressed the tip of the pen against the page, and then I crossed it out. The moment the ink smeared, the entire hotel shuddered. The walls groaned. The air shifted. Like the hotel itself had just felt something being ripped from it. Like it was angry. A deep, inhuman whisper filled the room. Not from Mr. Langley. Not from the woman. From the walls. From everywhere at once. You don't belong. You were never here. You are a mistake. The door burst open. I spun, my breath catching. Mr. Langley stood in the doorway, but he wasn't right anymore. His face was stretched, his mouth too wide, his eyes nothing but black. The shadows around him shifted, stretching out like long, reaching hands. The hotel was trying to take me back. Run, the woman gasped. Find the exit before it closes. I didn't hesitate. I bolted. The hallway outside was different now. Warped. The carpet soaked with something thick and dark. The wallpaper peeling, revealing rotting wood underneath. This wasn't a normal hotel anymore. This was something alive. Something that had been pretending to be normal. And now,